Okay, what's up, folks? Rich Fantassel with you. It is Tuesday, October 17th, 2017. NBA season starts tonight. Of course, last night we did the previews of each conference. Now we're going to do the postseason predictions and all that, and we'll also give you the postseason awards predictions: MVP, Coach of the Year, Rookie of the Year, Six Man. And maybe I won't do Six Man predictions; those are kind of tough. But everything else, Defensive Player of the Year, all that stuff. So, in the Eastern Conference, look, it's pretty obvious it's going to be the Celtics and the Cavaliers squaring off in the Eastern Conference Finals yet again. We may see a team like Washington sneak in there if John Wall just completely elevates his game, to a ridiculous level in the playoffs. If one of the teams suffers an injury, say Washington can get to a 3 spot, Cleveland's at 2, or vice versa, Cleveland's at 1, Washington's at 4, in Cleveland, they may not have gelled at that point of the season yet, just to some extent. Maybe I could see Washington getting in there, but the Celtics have just way too much firepower not to make it to the Eastern Conference Finals where they were there last year. They've only improved quite substantially. Cleveland, if anything, would have devolved just a bit. So there's no reason to see the Celtics not being there. I still expect Cleveland to come away with the victory and go to the finals. I would like it in 6 games, a much more competitive 6 games. However, as you remember, the 5-game series they played, Cleveland basically bludgeoned the Celtics in all of the victories they had, and then they played one close game. The Celtics will be much more into it. They have, some firepower on the roster now with Hayward, with Kyrie Irving. I felt one of their biggest problems was last year when Isaiah Thomas went off the court. That's when they really struggled to find offense. They're not going to run into those situations. A lot will depend on Brown and Tatum, how they come along. Marcus Smart off the bench, I'm not completely sold on, but I'd still take Cleveland just with LeBron James 4-2 over the Celtics to advance to the finals. In the Western Conference, obviously Golden State is going to be in the Western Conference Finals. It really comes down to you're looking at Oklahoma City or Houston, which one of those teams is gonna play the Golden State Warriors when they play each other in a series. You would have to assume they're going to be 2-3. I like Oklahoma City to move on. You have teams like the Spurs. Spurs just way too many question marks. I don't think Minnesota is quite ready for that yet. Oklahoma City, as we said, they could be a championship team really in any other season. They still could potentially, I guess, win the finals this year. Russell Westbrook is that much of a force of nature. However, it's a situation where I just don't think they have enough around those 3 guys to beat a team like the Golden State Warriors. I don't expect that Houston can beat Oklahoma City in a series. There's too much. Chris Paul would get outplayed by Russell Westbrook in a series, and that's why Oklahoma City would play the Golden State Warriors. I'd still look for a 5-game series. Golden State, that's just how much of a shame it is that Kevin Durant went to Golden State. They would basically dismantle a team with Paul George, Carmelo Anthony, and Russell Westbrook on a team in 5 games. That's not okay for the NBA. So Golden State would advance, and then I predict them to win in 6 games against the Cleveland Cavaliers in the finals, the Warriors, that is. Cleveland, you added Jay Crowder, will give you some defense. You don't lose necessarily much on the offensive side with Isaiah Thomas, but again, Golden State would beat the Cleveland Cavaliers pretty handily. I would still take 6 games because there were a few games Cleveland could have won that may have swung it the other way in last year's final. But the Golden State Warriors in 6 games to win the NBA Finals. Now, of course, for the postseason awards, MVP. Look, this is a real toss-up one. Call me a homer on this one. I'm gonna say Kyrie Irving wins it, because Kyrie Irving goes to Boston, really wants to establish himself outside of LeBron James' shadow, and he puts up some monster numbers. The Celtics win that conference. They are better than Cleveland in the regular season. Remember, it's a regular season award for whatever you want to argue about that, and that's why I would give it to Kyrie Irving. A guy like Russell Westbrook, his numbers are going to come down because you're bringing in Paul George and Carmelo Anthony. No one on Golden State I can really give it to just because they have all those guys. Could Jimmy Butler potentially, if he just completely brings that team all the way up in Minnesota? Yes. John Wall, same situation. You do have Hayward, you do have Horford in Boston, but Kyrie Irving, coming from Cleveland wanted to get under LeBron James' shadow. I would think that would be the MVP this year, because you look at a lot of the guys aligning. James Harden just aligned with Chris Paul. That takes away a lot of votes. You have to look at the storylines behind it. So you can call me a homer. That's really the only reason I'm picking Kyrie Irving to win the MVP. Defensive Player of the Year. Kawhi Leonard is usually always in the conversation. I don't really have a problem with Kyrie Leonard. Can't really talk this morning. I do think there are just better defenders, though, in the NBA. I think a guy like Andre Drummond should win it with what he does on the glass, how he cleans up the boards and does all that stuff. They'd like to give it to the perimeter defenders, but, let's give the guys the center some love in this situation, because they're really not doing much on the offensive side of the ball. And having an eraser back there, a guy who can not only, and Drummond doesn't even really block shots, but just the rebounding. When you're going to press guys, when you're going to close out to the three-point line, okay, you're leaving a lot of rotations that have guys underneath the basket, where it's basically one, big rebounder against three, guys crashing the offensive boards. That's why I'm going to pick Andre Drummond, and I think he's really going to help Avery Bradley, and that, allow Avery Bradley in Detroit to press, and maybe a co-defensive player of the year. You could see something like that, because I could see Detroit being a very good defensive team. Rookie of the year, it's simple for me. It's going to be Markelle Fultz. I don't see really any other guy. A lot of people, especially being a Celtics fan, they really talk up Jason Tatum. I don't know. I've never been, turned away or had any caution when it comes to Markelle Fultz. I'd expect him to win Rookie of the Year, and it should be pretty easy. Coach of the Year, Tom Thibodeau in Minnesota, really, no doubts about that. If that team doesn't perform to expectations, then he should be out, but there's really nothing that you could see that they don't make the playoffs this year. They've added too many veterans. They have too many young pieces. Could Luke Walton, if he gets the team in the playoffs? Certainly. Brad Stevens has never won it. I don't think he really has a chance to win it. Of course, in the future, if he stays with the Celtics and something else happens, yes. I think he kind of should have gotten it a few years ago and kind of missed his boat. Almost he was doing, he's a victim of his own success in this case. He never really did quite well enough to win the Coach of the Year, and then when they started to do well enough, it really wasn't a surprise anymore. So that's why Coach of the Year, I like Tom Thibodeau of the Minnesota Timberwolves, and you could see a guy like Luke Walton get it. Sixth Man of the Year, I will give it to Eric Gordon. And again, six-man changes, so take this with a grain of salt. I'll give it to Eric Gordon of the Houston Rockets. All right, so that is it for the previews and the postseason awards and all that stuff. I told you I'd get it done to you some way, somehow. I'll probably do a Celtics, preview if I can in enough time this morning. The weekly NBA reports, I'm looking at either Saturday or Sunday is when I'll do them. And I'll also probably do the weekly Celtics report for any one of you who is interested in that as well. Be sure to stay tuned, and we will catch you next time. Remember, we appreciate all subscriptions. Thank you.